In our last episode, months of rebuilding culminated in the moment every recovering professional dreads, when Scott declared Ty ready for the licensing exam that would officially restore his veterinary credentials. The announcement brought terror alongside readiness, as Ty scheduled exam for 3 weeks out, beginning countdown to moment when everything would be tested officially. Preparation intensified dramatically with 12-hour study days, Scott's relentless drilling, and family rallying completely around Ty's needs. Word spread through Hudson, bringing mixed community reactions, and Ty wrestled with fear of failing after everything: the support, the time, the belief everyone had invested in his recovery. 2 weeks before exam brought breaking point when Ty confronted what failure would mean, but Amy and Lisa reminded him that he'd already proven his competence through successful work. Final week brought frantic preparation, and exam day arrived bringing 8 hours of testing that Ty described as harder than anything he'd practiced for, complex enough that he wasn't certain whether his preparation had been sufficient. The episode ended with results pending for 2 weeks. 2 weeks until they'd know if months of rebuilding were enough, if Ty Borden would officially become Dr. Borden again. If you're enjoying this season, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Today, waiting reaches its conclusion as results arrive, bringing the answer Ty has staked everything on. But sometimes the moment we've been desperately anticipating requires private processing before public celebration. Sometimes we need to let profound change settle into our bones before making it real through sharing. And sometimes the people who love us have to understand that joy can be complicated when it represents the end of a 4-year nightmare. The 2 weeks following Ty's licensing exam passed with the particular torture that comes from waiting for life-changing news over which you have no control. The exam was complete, the answers submitted, the evaluation happening somewhere beyond Ty's reach by people who didn't know him, didn't know his story, would judge solely on whether his knowledge met standards regardless of the extraordinary journey that brought him to that testing room. Results were promised within 14 business days. Ty checked his email obsessively, first thing each morning, multiple times throughout each day, last thing before bed. Every notification made his heart race. Every message that wasn't from the licensing board felt like crushing disappointment followed by relief that judgment wasn't yet delivered. He tried to maintain normal routine, continued assisting Scott with cases, though his focus was compromised by constant anxiety, helped at Heartland construction site, where the barn had reached 73% completion, the structure now recognizably a building rather than framework. Spent time with Amy and Lindy, attempting to be present despite mind constantly cycling through exam questions and wondering whether his answers had been sufficient. Amy watched him struggle through those 2 weeks with her own parallel anxiety. She believed he'd passed, believed his preparation had been thorough, and his knowledge solid. But belief didn't eliminate fear. If Ty had failed despite everything, the devastation would be profound. He'd staked his entire identity on passing, had worked himself to exhaustion preparing, had accepted support from family and community that carried expectations. The community continued asking about results with frequency that added pressure Ty didn't need. Every trip to Maggie's, every encounter at the hardware store, every conversation at the construction site brought the same questions. Have you heard yet? When do results come? Are you confident you passed? Ty responded with variations of still waiting, while internally screaming that he had no idea whether he'd passed, that confidence was impossible when he'd second-guessed half his answers, that he was terrified of disappointing everyone who believed in him. Sleep became difficult. Ty would lie awake running through exam questions, remembering scenarios he'd answered, agonizing over calculations he'd done, wondering if the judgment calls he'd made would be considered correct by evaluators who had no context for the difficulty of his recovery. Amy held him through nightmares where he failed spectacularly, where the notification came saying he'd scored far below minimum, where 4 years proved too much to overcome despite months of brutal effort. The weather during those 2 weeks mirrored the internal tension. No rain fell, temperatures remained unseasonably warm for mid-November. The drought that had been developing all autumn was now impossible to ignore. Grass brown and dead across the province, trees showing stress, water levels in creeks and rivers visibly low. News reports talked increasingly about fire danger despite being well into what should have been safer season. But those environmental concerns felt abstract compared to the immediate question consuming Ty's every waking moment. Had he passed? Day 14 arrived, the final day of the promised 2-week window for results. By late afternoon, Ty had checked his email roughly 40 times. Nothing. With each passing hour, he convinced himself that no news meant bad news, that they were delaying notification because he'd failed, and they were processing his retake application. He was at the Heartland construction site around 4 p.m., ostensibly checking on the crew's progress, but actually needing distraction from obsessive email checking. His phone was in his pocket, set to maximum volume so he wouldn't miss notification if it came. At 4:17 p.m., his phone chimed. Email notification. Ty's hands shook as he pulled phone from his pocket. The sender, Alberta Veterinary Licensing Board. The subject line, examination results. For several seconds, he couldn't make himself open it. This was the answer. Everything he'd worked for reduced to words in an email. Pass or fail, restoration or permanent loss. 4 years overcome or proven insurmountable. Standing alone near the rising barn framework, Ty opened the email. The first word he saw was the only word that mattered, passed. He had to read it 3 times before his brain could process. Passed. Not unfortunately, or we regret to inform you, or any of the devastating openings he'd been terrifying himself with for 2 weeks. Just passed. The email continued with details. Overall score, 84%, well above the 75% minimum required. Pharmacology section, 89%. His weakest area before preparation, now among his strongest. Clinical judgment, 87%. Legal and ethical scenarios, 81%. All sections above minimum. All sections demonstrating competence. He was Dr. Borden again, officially, legally, recognized by the licensing board as competent to practice veterinary medicine independently in Alberta. 4 years of absence had been overcome. Months of rebuilding had been sufficient. The exam that represented everything had been passed. Ty stood frozen in shock and disbelief, reading the email again and again, each time expecting the words to change or reveal themselves as cruel hallucination. But they remained constant. Passed. Dr. Borden, licensed veterinarian. His first instinct was to run to Amy, to call Scott, to shout the news to the construction crew working 50 feet away. But something held him back. Some need for private processing before making this public and real. He walked to his truck and drove without conscious destination to the spot he and Jack used to visit. Hilltop overlooking Heartland's valley, place where they'd had important conversations about life and loss and perseverance. He hadn't been here since Jack's death, had avoided it because the grief felt too raw. But now, sitting alone on the familiar hillside, Ty finally let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. He'd done it, against odds that had felt impossible, despite 4 years of absence that should have destroyed his veterinary identity permanently, through months of work so brutal he'd wanted to quit repeatedly. He'd done it. The tears came then, profound relief and joy and grief all tangled together. Relief that the nightmare was over. Joy that he'd proven 4 years could be overcome. Grief for Jack not being here to witness this victory, for Tim never knowing Ty had succeeded, for all the time that had been lost that passing exam couldn't restore. He cried alone on the hilltop where Jack had taught him about perseverance and resilience and the difference between failing and being a failure. Jack would have been proud. Jack would have said he never doubted. Jack would have reminded him that hard things are worth doing precisely because they're hard. Ty sat until the sun started lowering toward horizon, watching shadows lengthen across the valley that held everything he loved. Heartland rising again from ashes, his family supporting him through recovery, the community that had given him space to rebuild. He was Dr. Borden again. The words finally started feeling real instead of just abstract information in an email. By the time Ty returned to Fairfield, it was after 6 p.m. Amy met him at the door with expression that was part anxiety, part frustration.
Where have you been? You disappeared from the construction site without telling anyone. I've been calling for an hour.
I'm sorry. I just needed some time alone.
Did you hear from the licensing board? Did results come?
The question hung between them, and Ty realized he was at a crossroads. He could tell her now, share the news that would transform this moment into celebration. Or he could continue keeping it private, buying more time to process privately before making it public and real. He chose honesty over continued secrecy.
Results came this afternoon. At the construction site.
Amy's face went very still, reading his tone and trying to determine whether this was good or bad news.
And?
I passed.
The words didn't seem adequate for what they represented. I passed. 2 simple words that meant the end of 4-year nightmare, the restoration of professional identity, the validation that months of brutal work had been sufficient. Amy's response was immediate and explosive. Joy so profound she actually screamed. She threw herself at Ty, hugging him with strength that nearly knocked him backward, crying and laughing simultaneously.
You passed. Oh my God, Ty, you passed. I knew you would. I knew your preparation was enough. I knew.
She pulled back suddenly, her expression shifting from pure joy to confused hurt.
Wait. Results came this afternoon? What time?
Around 4:15.
It's after 6 now. Why didn't you call me immediately? Why didn't you come tell me? I've been worried sick thinking something happened to you.
The hurt in her voice cut through Ty's emotional fog. She was right to be hurt. This was their victory. She'd supported him through every step of recovery, had carried household responsibilities while he studied, had held him through panic attacks and nightmares. She deserved to know immediately.
I'm sorry. I should have called right away. I just needed time to process privately before making it public. The moment I told you, it would become real and shared, and I needed it to be just mine for a little while first.
Ty, this isn't just yours. This is ours. We did this together. All those nights studying, all the sacrificing, all the supporting, we did that as team. And you kept the most important news from me for 2 hours?
She wasn't yelling, but the hurt was clear in every word. Ty pulled her close again, understanding her pain while also knowing he'd needed that private time.
You're right. I'm sorry. I should have shared it with you immediately. But Amy, I needed to go sit on the hill where Jack and I used to talk. I needed to be alone for a little while with this enormous thing that just happened. I needed to let it settle in my bones before making it real through celebration.
He showed her the email on his phone, letting her read the results herself. Her tears started again, seeing the official notification, 84% overall, every section passed, Dr. Ty Borden restored.
I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. And I understand needing private time to process. But Ty, the people who love you, have been waiting 2 weeks for this news too. They deserve to celebrate with you.
I know. I'm ready to tell them now. I just needed those 2 hours first.
They stood together on Fairfield's porch, holding each other while the magnitude of what had been accomplished settled over both of them. 4 years of nightmare ended with an email notification. Professional identity restored through months of brutal work. Future that had felt impossible now genuinely achievable. Inside Fairfield, Lisa and Lindy were in the kitchen preparing dinner. Amy and Ty walked in together, both of them carrying energy that made Lisa look up immediately, with question clear on her face. What happened? You both look.
Results came this afternoon.
The kitchen went completely silent. Lindy froze mid-motion, setting the table. Lisa's hand stilled on the pot she'd been stirring. Every molecule of air felt charged with anticipation. Did you pass?
I passed.
Lindy shrieked with pure joy, dropping the silverware she'd been holding and running to throw herself at her father. Lisa's eyes filled immediately with tears, and she sank into a chair with expression that combined relief and pride and something deeper recognition of how hard this victory had been earned. Jack would be so proud, so incredibly proud. You did what felt impossible. You overcame 4 years through sheer determination and work ethic that's remarkable. The celebration that erupted in Fairfield's kitchen was emotional and loud and joyful in ways they hadn't been since before Jack's death. Lindy insisted on making celebratory signs with markers and construction paper. Lisa opened wine she'd been saving for special occasion. Amy kept hugging Ty like she couldn't quite believe it was real. They called Caleb, who arrived within 20 minutes with Ashley. Both offered congratulations that carried genuine joy, Caleb from friendship, Ashley from understanding what rebuilding professional identity required. Around the dinner table that evening, the conversation centered entirely on Ty's accomplishment, the exam difficulty, the 2 weeks of torture waiting for results, the moment the email arrived, the knowledge that 4 years truly could be overcome, despite how impossible that had seemed at the start. Lisa proposed toast that captured what they were all feeling. To Ty, who proved that absence doesn't permanently destroy identity, that skills can be rebuilt through patient work, that perseverance through failure leads eventually to success. Jack always said the measure of character isn't avoiding failure but continuing after failure. Ty, you embodied that completely. You're Dr. Borden again, and you earned that title through months of work that would have broken someone with less determination. They drank to that. The emotion thick in the room. This wasn't just personal victory, it was family victory. Everyone had contributed to making it possible through support and belief, and refusing to let Ty quit when the work felt impossible. Later that evening, Lindy pulled Ty aside for private moment. I always knew you'd pass, Dad. I never doubted for a second. The absolute faith in her voice broke something open in Ty's chest. 10-year-olds had that gift. Complete belief uncompromised by adult cynicism or realistic assessment of probabilities. She'd known he would pass simply because she believed in her father completely.
Thank you for never doubting. That faith helped more than you know.
The following morning brought Scott's response when Ty called with news. The pride in Scott's voice was unmistakable and deeply meaningful. Validation from the professional who'd guided the entire rebuilding process. I knew you'd pass. Your preparation was thorough and your skills were solid. This is official recognition of what you'd already proven through your work. Congratulations, Dr. Borden. Dr. Borden. The title felt strange and wonderful simultaneously. Ty hadn't been called that in 4 years. Hearing it again felt like coming home to himself. Scott had immediate practical suggestion. We should make an announcement to the community. Give everyone who supported your recovery chance to celebrate. What if we did something at Heartland construction site this weekend? Barn's nearly complete, would be fitting location. The idea felt right. Heartland rising from ashes while Ty's career rose from ruins. Both reconstructions succeeding through patient, consistent work supported by community that refused to give up. That weekend, word spread quickly through Hudson about gathering at Heartland to celebrate Ty's success. The response was overwhelming, dozens of people showing up Saturday afternoon to the partially completed barn that stood as testament to perseverance. The construction crew had set up temporary seating and refreshment tables. The barn's interior was still unfinished, but the structure was sound, the roof complete, the space protected from elements. Standing inside felt like standing inside promise. This would be working barn again soon, housing the veterinary practice Ty could now legally operate. Scott spoke first, his words carrying the weight of professional assessment. Most of you know the journey Ty's been on for the past months. Returning after 4-year absence, rebuilding skills that absence should have destroyed, working toward licensing exam that represented everything. I've watched him handle dozens of cases, seen him diagnose complex conditions, witnessed him make clinical judgments that were consistently sound. Ty Borden earned his license restoration through extraordinary work ethic and determination. He's not just passed an exam, he's genuinely recovered his professional competence. Hudson is fortunate to have Dr. Borden practicing here again. The applause was genuine and sustained. Dan Dawson spoke next, sharing story about Ty's successful emergency surgery on Rocky, the first real case that had proven Ty's skills were functional. Other clients shared similar stories of competent treatment and successful outcomes. Amy watched Ty accept the recognition, seeing him let himself feel pride without the fear that had accompanied every previous success. He'd done it, actually done it, passed the test that meant everything, proven 4 years could be overcome. Lisa spoke last, her words carrying emotional weight that made several people tear up. Jack Bartlett taught everyone who knew him about perseverance, about continuing after failure rather than avoiding failure, about the difference between failing at something and being a failure. Ty, you embodied every lesson Jack tried to teach. You failed practice exams, you doubted yourself, you wanted to quit, but you kept going. You kept working. You kept believing that recovery was possible even when it felt impossible. Jack would be phenomenally proud of what you've accomplished. Tim would be proud, Marion would be proud, and everyone here is proud. Welcome back, Dr. Borden. The celebration continued through the afternoon, conversation and laughter and relief that the nightmare was finally over. Ty stood in the barn that was rising like his career, official veterinary license in his pocket, surrounded by community that had never stopped believing even when he'd struggled to believe in himself. Caleb and Ashley found him late in the afternoon, both offering private congratulations away from the crowd.
You did it, man. Actually did it. I'm proud of you.
What you accomplished is remarkable. Most people don't have the determination to rebuild after complete devastation. You do. That's extraordinary.
As the sun lowered toward horizon, painting Alberta's sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Ty stood at Heartland's entrance looking out over the valley. This was his home. This was his identity. This was the life he'd fought for and won back through months of work that had felt endless while he was in it, but now felt worth every brutal hour. Amy joined him, slipping her hand into his.
How does it feel, being Dr. Borden again?
Like I'm finally home. Like I'm finally myself. Like 4 years of nightmare are actually over.
They stood together as the celebration continued behind them, both processing the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The exam was passed. The license was restored. The future they'd been building toward was now genuinely possible. Behind them, the television someone had brought showed evening news on low volume. The anchors discussed Alberta's critical drought conditions, fire danger ratings that remained extreme despite being November, climate patterns that had meteorologists issuing increasingly urgent warnings. But tonight, those warnings felt distant. Tonight was about celebration and victory and the end of 4 years of suffering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and environmental concerns that would demand attention. Tonight, they had this. Ty officially restored as Dr. Borden, surrounded by community celebrating his extraordinary recovery, standing in barn rising from ashes, finally genuinely believing that the hardest part was behind them. That concludes today's episode of Heartland. 2 weeks of agonizing waiting ended when exam results arrived, bringing the answer everything depended on. Ty had passed, achieving overall score of 84% with every section above minimum, pharmacology strength, demonstrating how effective months of preparation had been. But instead of immediate celebration, Ty needed private time to process the profound magnitude of what passing meant. 4 years overcome, identity restored, nightmare ended. He drove to the hillside where he and Jack used to talk, letting himself feel the full weight of success before making it public. Amy's hurt when she discovered he'd kept results secret for 2 hours was valid, but she understood his need for private processing before shared celebration. Family gathering at Fairfield brought explosive joy. Lindy's shrieking excitement, Lisa's tears of pride, recognition that this was victory earned through brutal work that would have broken someone with less determination. Weekend community celebration at nearly complete Heartland Barn gave everyone who'd supported Ty's recovery chance to witness official recognition, with Scott, Dan Dawson, and clients sharing stories of Ty's competent work and Lisa honoring how Jack's teachings about perseverance had manifested in Ty's journey. The episode ended with Ty standing in rising barn as Dr. Barned officially again, license in pocket, surrounded by community that never stopped believing, finally allowing himself to feel pride without fear and to believe that 4 years of nightmare were genuinely over. Join us next time when Amy discovers the full extent of what Ty kept secret during his recovery journey, the months of hidden studying, the depth of his struggle, everything he shielded her from. When Ty begins practicing independently as licensed veterinarian, when construction reaches completion, and when background climate warnings begin demanding attention as conditions visibly worsen across Alberta. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Western Flavors.